Jonathan. Thank you so much for coming to the Art of Psychiatry talk today.
It's my pleasure.
And it's about Sarah Kane. So you have done a lot of work on Sarah Kane. And
yes, I've directed two plays by Sarah Kane which were performed at the Edinburgh Festival, Crave in 2002 and Phaedra's Love in 2004. And tonight we heard from a Sarah Kane scholar, Graham Saunders, from the University of Reading, and he and I shared the discussion and presented some work to your audience about ways in which Sarah Kane's work could explore psychiatric disorders, but also ways in which Sarah Kane's own biography, which included clinical depression and staging her subjective experience, might be an interesting stimulus for a discussion involving clinicians.
It was an excellent discussion while I was there, and I just wondered what drew you to Sarah Kane's work in the first place?
Well, I've always been very interested in the theatre of Samuel Beckett, and I came to Sarah Kane quite naturally by working through Beckett to playwrights like Harold Pinter and Howard Barker, and then found Sarah Kane as a young person. And I started reading Sarah Kane as an A-level student, and when I was an English and drama student at Warwick University. And at that time there was a real momentum around her work, because there was a feeling that, following her unfortunate suicide, that there was quite a special talent that had been lost, and the Royal Court Theatre was staging what they were calling a Sarah Kane Festival in 2000-2001, and there were a lot of academic monographs being published for the first time about it. There was a real sense that here was a moment, a millennium moment, and we put on what was the first production of revival of Crave, which had opened at the Edinburgh Festival at the Travellers Theatre in '98, and we did it 4 years later, and there was a massive response, and people wanted to talk about Sarah Kane and were very interested in watching the work. And what I was saying tonight about that play was the interconnected monologues, the fragmented creation of self on stage is a really beautiful way of presenting the human. And it's something that might be of interest to medical humanities audiences as well as theatre audiences.
Yes, one of the theme that was drawn out today from the discussion is the intensity of the doctor and patient relationship that Sarah Kane has described very vividly in her work.
That's right, and we were looking at a later play, her last play, which was produced posthumously, called 4.48 Psychosis, and in that play she ceases to give us actual characters, but she gives us a lot of testimony, and this subjective testimony really zeroes in on her experience as a patient in a psychiatric encounter. So you get an extended section about her experience of doctors and her experience of the psychiatric ward, and that play is often understood in relation to a line in Sarah Kane's drama, victim, perpetrator, bystander. And those three figures are very interesting when directing her work, because often the scenes, and particularly 4.48, is a conversation between a victim, a perpetrator, and a bystander. So she almost presents a psychiatric situation as a situation of conflict or violence, which of course is problematic from a caregiving point of view. Yeah, but we're often given a very sarcastic, quite aggressive voice. But as we were discussing, or as Graham Saunders was saying today, she has this wonderful gallows humour. And that one of the things, despite her experience of clinical depression, that is so clear in the drama is this humour, this life-saving humour.
Yes, because I think, because you mentioned earlier about her tragic death, I think a lot of people associate with her work with quite negative feelings. And I just wonder, because you mentioned humour quite a lot during the talk today, whether you can give us some thought how she uses humour in her work.
Well, I think as a playwright, she knows that that's one of your tools. So as a dramatist, you have a toolkit, and we are in a position in late modernism where we don't just write tragedies or comedies, like Shakespeare wrote tragedies, comedies or histories. Beckett called Waiting for Godot a tragicomedy, and I think Sarah Kane knows that the drama of the post-war period and of the millennium period is a tragicomic voice, and so she mixes in humour with the tragic. And as a psychiatric patient herself, she's dealing with her sense of the ridiculous, a sense of sarcasm, a sense of irony, even when feeling these tremendously powerful feelings of depression and despair.
Okay. And how would you summarise like how relevant is like Sarah Kane's work to like a training psychiatrist now? Because that's what I put this in there.
Well, I know that it's relevant to psychiatry because we did an event. We did an event 2 years ago with student doctors at Warwick Medical School, and we had practicing clinicians come along as well, and they found that the portraits of psychiatric care were quite negative, and all of the experienced clinicians said, oh no, it's quite realistic, this will be what it's like. So we were using the play there as a kind of safe space, not the real clinical space, but a safe space in which to explore problems that they may encounter in real life. So we were using drama as a kind of pedagogic tool, where they could workshop through the drama of Sarah Kane how the patient might feel and how they might deal with particularly complex situations.
So it's like a vehicle for us to understand our own difficulty it encounters and the difficulty from the patient perspective.
It can be a vehicle for the clinician, but it's worth saying that for the artist it's not a vehicle. It is truth. It is what she felt, and it's what she wanted to leave behind. But it has a practical application as well, and that is where I would locate the hope in the story, that the fact that we're still talking about it now, nearly 20 years later, and that it might have some clinical relevance is actually a fantastic opportunity to find hope in what has been quite an upsetting story.
That's great. Thank you so much for talking
to us. Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.